Welcome back, everybody. Gaming Grandpa here with part 2 of my MLS Explained tutorial Football Manager 2024 video, Redone. This is terms and definitions. I'm going to do my best not to confuse you, but MLS Player Rights, it's one of the most confusing, other than Homegrown, it's one of the most confusing terms used in MLS. And there's a lot more than what I'm listing here. So just bear with me. I'm going to, try not to confuse you and cover it, but it's very important that you understand this. Also, if you see an asterisk, some terms will be discussed in a different section. I'm not going to cover them in great detail. I will explain a little bit, but not in great detail. Okay. Whenever a player signs with a club, they're technically signing a contract with the league. The league pretty much authorizes the club to do whatever they want with that player, but the rights are owned by the league. That's why when you make trades with other MLS teams, the players can't do anything about it. They can't say anything. It's because their contract is owned by the league. And all the different rights include buying, trading, selling, releasing, waiving, or option declining. All of those are transferred to the club by the league. So when you sign a new player, you pay $3.5 million for a potential wonder kid. The league owns his contract. Just remember that. Now, there's different ways that the MLS rights are transferred or lost. If you release a player, not waiving, but releasing, and this is for unrestricted free agents only, then you lose the rights to that player. If you trade a player or you trade the rights to that player, then of course you lose the rights. Players that are claimed from the waiver wire. So when you release a player after the contract guaranteed date, they're no longer called released, they're called waived. And if another team does not, or if a team picks them up from the waiver wire, they claim them, then the rights are transferred to that team that claimed that player. If players are signed in the re-entry draft, the waiver or expansion draft, you also transfer the rights to that other team that drafted that player. The club holding the player's rights doesn't match an offer as a free agent, as a restricted free agent. So you release a player, he becomes a restricted free agent. If he does become a restricted free agent, other teams might want to sign that player. If they offer that player a contract, you're going to get a nice little message in your inbox that says, do you wish to match this offer? If you say no, then you lose the rights. If you say yes, you have to match whatever they're offering that contract, which might be more than what you offered or what you released a player for. But why would you do that? It doesn't make sense. It does happen in real life, believe it or not, but it's very rare. But if that happens and you do not countermatch that offer, then the team that signs that player gets their rights. You lose them. Okay. Ways that the rights are maintained. Waive players that clear the waiver wire. You still maintain the rights. Restricted free agents that have a counter offer accepted, you maintain the rights because you've already had them, and now you have the player again, probably paying him a higher salary. Any youth academy player that's not retained by the parent club. Now, with the Youth Academy, they are automatically released at the end of the year that they turn 18. And you're going to get messages in your inbox about this. And I just want you to understand, the only way to keep them in your team is to sign them to a contract. And you can't do a youth contract. It's really aggravating. Sometimes you can get your technical director to sign them. Sometimes you can get them to sign them. And if that happens, then they usually can offer them a cheaper contract, which it happens every now and then if you know how to do it. And it's just a luck of the draw because sometimes it won't work and sometimes it does. But if you don't retain them and they're automatically released, you still own the rights to them players. 9 times out of 10, if you don't retain them, they're not worth another team coming in and getting them anyway. They usually end up filtering through the American Pyramid system, which I covered in the previous episode. All the different leagues, actually, is what I meant to say in the Leagues Cup. Okay. Not Leagues Cup, but the U.S. Open Cup. God, I'm getting tired. Okay. Player signs for a team outside of the MLS. Whether their contract expired or you transferred them out, you still maintain the rights to those players. And I'm going to show you an episode, or not an episode, I'm going to show you an image of that later, because that actually happened to me in my New York Red Bulls stay, and it was kind of neat. Here is an example of a restricted free agent, Vinicius Melo, whose rights are still owned by his former club. This happened to me. He popped up on my scouting report for the New York Red Bulls. I want to sign him. I'm like, yeah, he's a good little player. He doesn't want too much money. He's a free transfer. And then when I went to sign him, I got this little message here that said, trade for player rights. I'm like, what? And I looked at his history, and sure enough, he was waived by Charlotte, and he cleared waivers. So he's a restricted free agent now. And Charlotte still owns the rights. So I wanted to sign him. So I had to first trade for the player rights. It's really crazy. And I bargained with him and did everything I could. But I ended up, I think I gave him a 3rd round pick and some allocation money. And that's just for the rights to be able to sign him. But once again, going back to MLS Player Rights, once that trade's complete, Charlotte no longer owns the rights of that player. I do. My team does. Well, the league does, and I'm just renting it from the league. But the rights got transferred. Here is an example of me owning rights to a player. Kyle Duncan. He's playing for, I can't even remember, Netherlands, I think, maybe. But right here it says Kyle Duncan began his career at the New York Red Bull Academy. I own the rights to this player. I got a message in my inbox that said Houston are trying to sign Kyle Duncan and bring him back to the MLS, but I own the rights. It's kind of interesting. It doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. So I got a 2nd round draft pick for the rights to Kyle Duncan. So I no longer own the rights, but I did get a 2nd round draft pick. So you could ask for, I've never been able to get an international player slot. They won't do it. Usually it's $50,000 or a 2nd or 3rd round pick, depending on the player. If it's a really, really good player, sometimes a 1st round draft pick, some allocation money, things like that. But anytime a player leaves the MLS that's played here and met different criteria, they become, wherever team they go to, it could be their 1st, 2nd, or 3rd team. The team that they left the MLS from still owns the rights to them. Now we're getting into the nitty-gritty. Salary cap, also known as the wage cap, the wage budget, or salary budget. This is the salary that the league pays for a team's senior spots. Every team in the league gets this amount of salary cap. For 2023, it's $5,210,000. Salary budget charge is the amount of salary the league is paying for a player. Whether it's $1 or the max budget charge, the league's paying that. The max salary budget charge is the max amount of salary the league will pay for a player. And in 2023, $651,250 is what it is, the max that they will pay. And that comes out of the total of $5,210,000. So say you try to sign 10 players to this, you're not going to be able to do it with your salary cap because it's just not going to work. Supplemental salaries. You have senior minimum salaries, which is $85,500 for 23, and a reserve salary, which is $67,500 for 23. The reserve salary is the lowest salary that a player playing in an MLS team can earn, the minimum amount. You do have a few of them, and I'll cover that here later. A max buy down salary for anyone under the max salary budget charge is 50% of the player's salary, or $150,000, whichever is less. And I will talk more about all of this later, buying down salaries. But you can overspend on a salary cap. You can have $7-8 million if you have allocation funds to reduce it back down, because you can't register a team if your salary cap is over this amount. And that's what allocation funds come in handy, and you can use it to buy down. That's what this is talking about. All right. So for an example, player one's salary, he's getting $400,000 a year. If you wanted to, you can use allocation money, which is $1 of allocation money, to reduce $1 of salary from the salary cap. Okay, it's a 1-for-1 exchange. But you can reduce that down to $150,000. 50% would be $200,000, but you're authorized to take the least amount. So you can technically buy that one down to $150,000. And that frees up $350,000 or $250,000 in cap room. Player 2 salary is $250,000. So if you use the 50%, that's $125,000 or $150,000, which is the lowest you can do other than 50%. So in this case, you could go down to $125,000. So hopefully you understand that. Buying down salaries is an important part of MLS contracts, MLS salaries. You need to kind of understand that. And I know I will cover that when I redo it again in my interactive series. That way you can see me actually doing it. To make it even more confusing, I'm going to give you an example, and this was in real life. It also was in Football Manager 24, but I looked it up, and it's exactly what St. Louis, the year they came into the league, what they spent. Okay? Max buy down salary for anyone over the max salary budget charge. Now remember, it's $651,250 is the max amount of salary that the league will pay per player. Okay? So anytime you offer somebody a contract that's over that, the money has to come from somewhere, basically. Okay? You're allowed to offer a player $1 million over the max salary budget charge. So you're able to offer them up to $1,651,250 in 2023. And as an example, Berkey was getting $1,632,000, and you can see Klaus, he's a DP, so I'll cover that later. All right, and Nielsen was getting $1,130,000. Now you got to be very careful with that. Sports Interactive has done a good job with Football Manager, especially the MLS. I'm not going to even dog them on this, but target allocation money is what you can use to buy down players' salaries. And it's recommended you do so. Now, the problem that I have is at the beginning of the year, which happens right after the end of the MLS Cup, it rolls over, finances and everything else, and Football Manager automatically takes all the target allocation money out already. I don't agree with that because in real life, that doesn't have to happen until registration date. You have to have your salary cap stuff figured out by then. All right. But what I'm trying to talk about here is this player here, Berkey. He's getting $1,632,000. Okay. You are allowed to use target allocation money to buy down to their budget charge. So in this case, I can use a little less than $1 million of targeted allocation money to buy him back down to $651,250. Okay, same thing with Nielsen. Designated players don't count, and I'll cover that again once again later. So matter of fact, the game makes you do this at the end of the MLS Super Cup in December. The league automatically does that for you. And I don't like that. But they only buy it down to the max budget charge. However, from the previous video, but the previous slide, when I showed you that you're allowed to buy salaries down 50% or to $150,000, whichever is less, you can still buy that down once it gets down to $650,000. You can still buy it down with general allocation money. Confused yet? Basically, try to stay away from offering players senior contracts that's over the max budget charge. Yes, you can do it. And it's okay to do it on one player because the target allocation money in the game, it's not used properly. So you have plenty of target allocation money left in the season, but be careful. Because, once again, at the end of the MLS Super Cup in December, that money will automatically roll over and that comes out. And I've yet to see it get credited back in if I trade that player or I release them or get rid of them. That's the thing that I don't like, and I wish that they would fix that. But this is just an example that you can pay players up to $1 million above the max senior or max salary budget charge. And every year, the salary cap and all the salaries go up, they increase. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that yes, you can offer senior contracts for more than $651,000. You can do that, but only up to $1 million extra. So, but be very careful doing that. All right. If you have any questions, which I'm sure you will, hit me up in the comments. I'll do my best to reply. Now it's roster time. There's two different rosters in the MLS. There's your senior roster and your supplemental roster. Your senior roster are slots 1 through 20. Now remember, you only have to have a minimum of 18 players on your team. Okay, so it's technically possible to have 18 out of 30, and that's it. Normally, these are your 11 starters and your 9 subs. Normally. Senior, minimum, salary, and reserve players can also fill these slots as well. Your supplemental roster are slots 21 to 30, and this is very confusing in real life, but in the game, I don't think that they handled it properly. It messes it up at times. But when you go to register, you'll see that it says you're only allowed 10 off-budget personnel or players. That's the supplemental roster, okay? And you're only allowed to have so many, and I'll cover that here in just a bit. Normally, people that are on the supplemental roster that get the reduced contracts, your reserves and SMS contracts, are your fringe players, your emergency backups. Like if you have a third goalkeeper, sometimes they'll be there. Your B team players that you promoted, your youth academy players, and sometimes Generation Adidas players, and I'll cover that later. Different contract types. For senior roster, you have the designated player contract, or DP. A lot of people call this the Beckham rule because it was created for him. Basically, that's usually your star players. Every team that comes into the league, they're automatically given 2 DP slots. You are allowed to buy an additional slot at $150,000. It's target allocation money. It comes out one-time fee. However, Football Manager screwed that up. Every year you get charged that, and I don't like that. They need to fix it because it's a one-time fee. One time. That means when you take over a team, you can buy it. But if the team already has a third slot, you shouldn't have to spend any more money, but it comes out anyway. Fix that, please. Enough ranting. The max amount that comes out of the salary cap is $651,250. That max budget charge, once again. There's no max salary after the budget charge. It comes out of your payroll. Technically, I guess there is a max on how much payroll your team has available, but most teams have a decent payroll available for DP players. So if you offer a player $5,651,250 a year, okay, the salary cap's only going to take a hit of $651,250. That's the max that's allowed to take a hit. So the rest of that money comes out of your payroll budget. And I've helped people on Reddit. I've posted different comments on different websites that people that don't understand are like, why can't I sign this player? You know, it's redded out. And I'm like, well, because look, your payroll. You don't have enough payroll to offer him the extra because the money comes out of payroll after that. That's only for DP players. Okay? Once again, you're allowed to have 3 max. Young DP players, also known as YDPs, contracts, they are 23 years or younger. So if you offer a player that's a potential wonder kid that's 19 and he wants a DP contract, it's technically a young DP contract. There is a difference, and I'll explain that here in just a bit. All right, but they have to be 23 years or younger. And when you're offering a contract, by the way, it doesn't specify young designated player or designated player. It's simply a designated player, but the game figures it out the right way. Now, usually these are for very high potential, high profile young players. And once again, the max, well, not once again, this is a different salary cap hit, okay? 21 to 23 year olds on a young designated player contract, the max salary budget is $200,000, and that's it. The rest of that money comes out of your payroll, just like up here. And if that player is 20 or younger, then the max salary budget hit is $150,000. Okay? And once again, salary cap covers budget charge only, no bonuses, fees, etc. I wish Football Manager would fix that because they totally have screwed that one up. All right? That pooch is barking and screaming because that pooch gets screwed every contract. All right? Salary cap is for salary only, not bonuses, not appearance fees, not substitution fees, not agent fees. It's for salary only, and please fix that. Done ran. Under 22 initiative program contracts. This is something that the MLS started a few years back to help teams sign younger players that don't quite make enough to be a DP contract. Okay? The max salary budget charge is the same as young designated player contracts, which I just covered. The key to this one is, in order to sign at under 22, they have to be under 22. They can't be 22. They have to be 21 or younger to sign them to this contract. Okay? And the contract must end in the season the player turns 25. So if you sign up for at 21, you can only sign them for 4 seasons, because then the contract is void and it's a mess. But it won't let you sign them if they're over 25. Now, you can extend or offer new contracts to the same under 22 player, but they must be under 22 at the time of finalizing that contract. So if they turn 24, you can't offer them a 1-year extension because they're older, okay? So this works on like 18-year-olds, for example, that, you sign a 5-year under 22 contract, which is good, but their release clause is so low that every year you want to give them a new contract, and you are allowed to do that as long as they're still under 22 when you offer them that contract. And when you're playing the game, I'm going to cover this in the videos later, in my interactive tutorials. But when you go to the contract screen and offer them contracts, you'll see the different ones available for that player. Okay? Senior contracts are this is what 80% of your senior roster, the 20 players, is going to be on is senior contracts, because you're only allowed 3 DPs and you're only allowed 3 under 22s. I didn't put that in there, but you're only allowed 3. So 14 players out of your 20 are going to be on senior contracts. Once again, the max salary is $1 million over the $651,250. But once again, as I explained that earlier, that's not beneficial to you. You don't want to do that if you could avoid it. It so happens that I wasn't able to avoid it with the New York Red Bulls for 1 year because all my players wanted improved contracts, and they went up and beyond that. And my TAM took it out, and it worked. The problem is the next season it screwed me up big time, and I had to get rid of some players because of that. So be very careful when using TAM to offer players on a senior contract over the max salary budget charge. It's very important you remember that. Remember I said you only have to have 18 players minimum on a roster? If you don't use slots 19 and 20, so you only have 18 registered players, your salary cap is still charged for them 2 slots. And it's the current price of a senior minimum salary contract, with for 23 is $85,500. So you're going to get $171,000 charged to your salary cap that you can't reduce or can't get away from if you only sign 18 players. Now, granted, if you sign 2 more senior players, it's going to be more money than that. But if you're wondering why you have an amount in your salary cap that doesn't match up because you only have 18 players, that's why. You get charged for filling them slots because teams are recommended to have 20. Okay, supplemental roster contracts. Your senior minimum salary for 23, it's $85,500. You can fill your entire supplemental roster with this type of contract. You're allowed to have 10 off-budget players, and that's what these are. Reserve contracts are $67,500. You're allowed to have only 6. So if you're thinking that 10 off-budget personnel includes 10 reserves, you won't be able to register them. You can only have 6. Now here's the kicker: you're allowed to have only 4 non-homegrown reserve players. So in order to have 6 reserve contracts, 2 of them have to be homegrown, and that's a term I'm going to cover here in just a bit. Generation Adidas contracts, also known as GA. It will appear on your little icon or bullet, whatever you want to call it, in your squad roster, and you'll see, like foreign and different things like that. You'll see GA, Generation Adidas contracts, okay? This is a joint program between the MLS and Adidas that sees a handful of top collegiate underclassmen and youth national team players signed by the MLS to Generation Adidas contracts and made available in the Super Draft. So you can trade for a Generation Adidas player once they're drafted, but that's where you pick them up at. So if you're doing the Super Draft, a lot of people think it's worthless. My first year with the New York Red Bulls, the first season, there was 16 Generation Adidas players. It was the largest draft I've ever been a part of, but that's why there were so many. Generation Adidas players are typically better players than what the rest of the draft is. Now, that doesn't mean you can't find a good player outside of that, but Generation Adidas players usually you can't go wrong with, okay? The league decides on and pays the Generation Adidas salaries. You don't have any control over that. Now, their second contract you do, because the Generation Adidas contract only lasts until you either try to extend by offering them a different contract, you release them, waive them, whatever. Then it's a different contract. Usually, there's less than 10 GA players per draft class, usually. One year I only had 4. So if you're not in the top 4 or 5 drafts, you're not going to get one. So if you're thinking about it, you might want to trade up. Okay, now the worst term used in Football Manager dealing with the MLS is homegrown. Forget what you think you know about the homegrown term used in world soccer. America had to go and screw this term up, and Sports Interactive didn't catch it. They don't do it right, and that's another issue they need to fix. Rant over. The Homegrown Player Rule is a Major League Soccer program that allows MLS teams to sign local players from their own development academies directly to MLS first team rosters. The player has to spend at least 1 year in a club's academy starting before the age of 15, while he also has to live in the club's territory. Okay? Youth academy players, you'll see this in your FM intake. You'll notice you have, 10, 15 new players in your academy. It comes from your FM intake, and they're automatically homegrown. It's just ridiculous. It doesn't work that way. But you'll notice you can have international players that can be homegrown also. It's only happened twice that I'm aware of in the history of the MLS. One was Davies, who went to play for Bayern Munich. He's a Canadian. Well, he's not Canadian. He came from Jamaica, I think, but then he ended up going to Canada, and he played in the MLS Academy, and he happened to be homegrown. But he was already living in that town, and he went to their academy, so it worked. I guess it's possible for some teams to go find some Columbia kids at age 14 and move them here and let them play in their academy. I don't see that happen. Matter of fact, it doesn't happen hardly at all, if not ever. So that's why the FM intake sometimes is really screwed up. All right. Depending on your director of football, if he's Belgium, you're going to see an influx of Belgian American kids, which I disagree with that. It shouldn't happen like that. But once again, I don't want to rant about that. I'm here to try to explain the homegrown rule. Now, there's no limit on the number of signings a team can make for homegrown players. The salaries vary. They can't exceed $100,000 over the current SMS salary. So it's currently $85,500. So the max you can offer them is $99.9 thousand more than the SMS salary. Okay? Just remember, it's really weird. If you try to offer it to them, it's not going to let you. Expansion teams can sign players to a direct homegrown contract by bypassing that 1 year requirement. All right, now this is currently not in FM, but St. Louis did that. They had a kid that just moved into their territory. He's going to be a star when he grows up, and they were able to bypass that 1 year rule and sign him directly to his first contract as a homegrown player, and it works. You can use TAM to sign the player's first contract. That's not in FM also, but I just wanted you to know how bad it's screwed up. Now, is there any benefit to having homegrown players? No, there's not. Okay? You know how England has where you have to have so many players homegrown, trained by country, trained by club? The only difference or the only benefit in the MLS for having a homegrown player is that you can have 2 homegrown players extra on reserve contracts. Then you can have 4 non-homegrown players and 2 homegrown to have 6 reserve contracts. That's the only benefit. There's no other benefit to having homegrown players in Football Manager. There's none. In real life, there's a lot, because teams will battle it out with local kids, and it's ridiculous. So they come up with this homegrown rule. And I'm going to show you a map of territories to kind of explain it a little bit better about the territory. But it's just ridiculous, and I don't want to get into it. Next slide. Okay, here's a territory map as of 2023 for that season. As you see, St. Louis City is included in it. Okay, and I know it gets kind of tough with the different colors, but this is the best map that I could find. Some teams have a vast territory. Other teams, not so much. Once again, Miami would probably have a better shot at this, at going to Colombia and going to South American clubs and finding 14-year-olds and moving them here, moving their families here, and getting them jobs somewhere, and that way they could go to the academy. They have a good chance of doing that. Then they can sign them kids. But Miami, they have a small little territory in Florida. That's it. That's Orlando. That's Atlanta. St. Louis is there. It's just, it's crazy how that works. New York Red Bulls, New York City, it's all crazy. Real Salt Lake has one of the biggest ones besides Colorado. LA, and that's what happens. The more teams that the MLS is getting, San Diego's going to get one, and they're going to have to redo the map again, because San Jose, I think San Diego's more up here, I believe, so they're going to get battling over Portland too. So it's crazy. But the homegrown rule states for, let's use Minnesota. They're the gray. It's easier to see. Okay. If they want to sign a kid from here, they can't. They cannot. They'll get fined, slapped on the wrist. They're going to get punished. You cannot do that because it's not, that player's not the territory of Minnesota. Now, if he moved over to here, they can do it then. Legally, they can do it. It's frowned upon, but it's poaching other players, but they can do that. All right. But to be fair, a lot of kids don't care. They just want to play in the MLS when they're young, go to the academies because there's a lot of benefits to them. But they have to live in this territory for 1 year. And they have to have played for that team's youth academy for 1 year before the age of 15. So that means they have to come into the academy and sign an academy contract at the age of 14. Okay? Then they can live in the territory from, say they sign at age 14 and turn 15 the next day. They're fine for the academy as long as they stay in it for 1 year, and then as long as they stay in the territory for a year, they're still good. Okay, so they don't have to live in it from 14 to 15. They just have to sign a contract and be in the academy for a year. And believe it or not, a lot of these teams have youth academies, just like regular soccer clubs. But I wanted to show you this map and show you how convoluted and messed up it is around certain states. But that's the territory that they're allowed to recruit youngsters from. And that's why a lot of teams have that's one reason why the Under 22 Initiative program was started. So that way, even though they're not homegrown, you can still sign young players because they want younger players in the league. Last slide here, guys. International players. Any player that is not considered domestic, U.S. citizens, green card, and or permanent resident, they're considered international. Every team must have a minimum of 5 international players on their registered squad. Each team comes into the league as an expansion team with 8 slots. Some teams don't have that now. They permanently traded them away. I don't recommend doing that in the game. I recommend trying to trade for them as much as you can because international slots are gold. You can sign 16-year-old kids from Colombia and they get here at age 18 and they're worth 10, 11 million already, and you sign them for 250,000. So it's very important to keep these slots up and trade for them. You can trade the players that are international, and you can trade international player slots. There's no limit on how many slots you can have, or players for that matter. As long as you have a slot, you can have 10 international slots and have 15 players, but you can only register 10. So you can loan them out, you can do different things, but you can have as many as you want, but your registration is only available to how many slots you have. Okay? Some teams in real life have had more than 15 international players. Atlanta United a couple years ago had 21. 21 international players on their team. They loaned out, I think, 11 or 12 of them, and they ended up having like 10 registered international players on their team. But it's very possible. They were pulling to Chelsea, man. They were signing all these young players and then they were sending them out on loan, helping them with green cards. And speaking of green cards, okay, in order to become a U.S. citizen, you have to have resided in the country continuously for 5 years. Okay? If you have been here for 4 years and you go home to, I don't know, Jamaica for a day, you have to start all over from the 5 years. It's gone. Okay? It's continuous. Now, a player can get a green card, and this is another issue that Football Manager really needs to fix, is with the green cards. I've had players on my team that have been here for 4 years and haven't earned a green card yet. I've had players that have been here 8 months and earned a green card. A lot of it is based off of potential. It's based off of their profile. I guarantee you Messi got a green card as soon as he landed in Miami. Guarantee it. It's just crazy. Every team has custom agents that work for them that help get players green cards. every team is authorized to get so many green cards a year in real life, so I really wish that Football Manager would do the same thing. It's very frustrating when you have players here that have been here for 2 to 4 years and they should have had a green card already. It's really aggravating. I've had some wonder kids, like Endrick, for example, is on my current team. He's been here 2 years now, doesn't have a green card. Are you kidding me? If you can't get that kid a green card, what chances do any of these other teams have? I mean, he's one of the best young players in the world, bar none. So I don't understand that. But that's something, in real life, he would have had one already. So MLS and Football Manager needs to have that fixed. But anyway, guys, sorry if I went on a tangent on a couple rant and ravens. I'm very passionate about the MLS and Football Manager, and I love it. Hopefully you have a better understanding of things. Once again, it's on my new Football Manager YouTube channel, so ask your comments, ask your questions, interact. I'd love to see people have group discussions on some of these things. I post on Reddit. I post all over the place trying to help people understand the MLS, because it's not as complicated as what you make it out to be, as what people make it out to be. But anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Part 3 is going to be coming up, so stay tuned. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you at the next one.